Welcome. My name is Jason Murray, and I'm a member of the Federalist Society Student Chapter at the University of Tulsa College of Law. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the horrific event that happened this afternoon in Utah with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We are shocked, appalled, and deeply saddened. Our prayers are with his family and loved ones, and may God rest his soul. May God heal our nation and bring us peace. With that, I want to welcome everybody and welcome to the second SOC sidebar brought to you by the Federalist Society Student Division and the Federalist Society at the University of Tulsa College of Law. For each month, the Student Division at a rotating chapter and the Student Division at the Federalist Society National Organization will host a Zoom series called SOC Sidebar, featuring a judge being interviewed by a student chapter president or other member about the judge's passion, hobby, or interest and how it interrelates with the law. Our second SOC sidebar features Judge Chad Readler, who will discuss travel. Judge Readler earned his undergraduate and law degree from the University of Michigan. After graduating, he served as a law clerk to Judge Alan Norris of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Judge Readler then began practicing law in the Columbus office of the international law firm Jones Day, eventually spending 10 years as a partner in the firm's issues and appeals practice group. While at Jones Day, Judge Readler appeared in state and federal trial and appellate courts across the country, most frequently at the Supreme Court of Ohio and the Sixth Circuit. Judge Readler also successfully argued before the United States Supreme Court in McQuiggan v. Perkins on behalf of an inmate claiming actual innocence. His other pro bono representations include representing capital defendants before the 10th Circuit and the Supreme Court of Ohio, as well as representing defendants sentenced to life in prison before the Sixth Circuit. While at Jones Day, Judge Readler traveled to Nairobi with Lawyers Without Borders to train Kenyan lawyers in prosecuting domestic violence cases. And he was also the recipient of the American Marshall Memorial Fellowship awarded by the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Following his career in private practice, Judge Readler served as Acting Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division of the United States Department of Justice from 2017 to 2019. In that role, Judge Readler led and supervised over 1,000 lawyers in the department's largest litigating division, briefing and arguing several cases on behalf of the United States in federal courts across the country, including high-profile cases significant to the administration and the department. In March 2019, Judge Readler was confirmed to serve as a circuit court judge on the Sixth Circuit. He resides in Columbus. And at the end of this evening's interview, we will open the floor to questions from the audience. You must be logged in as a participant in the Zoom webinar in order to ask a question. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature to submit your question. When we get to your question, I will read it out loud and address it during the session. Judge, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jason. I just wanted to echo what you said in the memory of Charlie Kirk. I feel awful for his family, for his friends, and everyone whose lives he touched. We've seen so much violence in the last few years, including, hitting very close to home for the Federalist Society when someone showed up at Justice Kavanaugh's house with a weapon and had planned on doing harm to his family. I just hope we never get to a point in this country where we can't have open political dialogue, legal dialogue, and we've had a lot of events that are really challenging those opportunities. And I just want to then thank the Federalist Society, because the Federalist Society is one of those organizations that is really trying to promote speech and not certain types of speech. Their Federalist Society is well known for hosting debates. That's really how the organization started. And I just really hope, again, we never get to a place where we're not able to have that sort of open dialogue where people can get together, discuss ideas, and leave peacefully. Today's a sad day, but I do appreciate everyone who's been able to join in for this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judge, for that. And it has been a difficult afternoon. but I'm looking forward to this. To get started, what first inspired your interest in travel?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say my parents, we did a lot of road trips growing up. We were not flyers. And in fact, I was sort of a little scared of flying probably in my 20s because I had done so little flying that when I had to start flying for work and other things, it was a little uncomfortable. But we took road trips. I grew up in Michigan and we drive to Florida a couple times a year to see family there. We had one epic trip where my parents and my sister and I loaded into our minivan and drove for 30 days across the country, basically across the northern United States to California, down the coast in California, and then across the southern part of the United States. If you know the movie Vacation and you're familiar with the Griswolds had nothing on the Raidlers in terms of our road trips. So that's probably what got me thinking about traveling. And I grew up in a really small town and was just really enamored with seeing big cities and seeing places that were different from where I grew up. And that's probably what inspired a lot of my interest in getting out there and seeing places.
Well, I can't imagine 30 days on the road. That sounds like quite a trip. Um, Doing that much travel, how has that shaped your worldview?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the great things about, I mean, people travel for lots of different reasons. Some people like to, go to the beach and um, just sort of unwind. Some people like to go to cities. Some people like to go see nature. Some people like to go for history reasons. I like all of those things, but I sort of just enjoy learning and new experiences. And travel brings that to you, whether it's, a day trip to some place that's a couple hours away or whether it's flying halfway across the world, you're just going to learn something new. You're just going to have a new experience you haven't had before. And I think that keeps you kind of alive. It keeps you fresh. It keeps you invigorated. And it can become a little addicting in a sense. Always sort of looking for kind of that, new experience and that thrill. And that's probably one of the things I enjoy most about traveling and seeing the country and seeing the world.
So, as an Oklahoman, I have to ask you because I know you were in Oklahoma here recently. How'd you like Oklahoma?
It's a great state. It is flat, and that's that's a well-earned reputation. But I was actually at the football game this weekend, and I was at a very high up seat. So the stadium was in Norman. I went to see the Michigan Oklahoma game. I was rooting for Michigan, who did not win. But from my seats, I could very clearly see downtown Oklahoma City, which was like 25 miles away. But every state has just got its charms, and I thought Oklahoma really, really nice people. Everyone I met, I really sort of appreciated the Southwestern culture, a lot of great food, a lot of great traditions. So I really enjoyed my visit. It's my second visit. My first time to Oklahoma was actually to represent a client on death row. It was a habeas case I had in the 10th Circuit. The good news is we won the case, but the trip was a pretty challenging one and pretty tough. So this occasion to visit the state was a little lighter, I would say.
It sounds like it. When you so you say you came to Oklahoma the first time on work. When you go on those work trips, do you get to do much traveling? Do you try to set aside any time to, get out after you're done arguing?
Yeah, I do. That was harder to do as a lawyer, as a practitioner at a law firm. But especially my current role, I do have some flexibility. So it's pretty common to link something professional, whether it's an argument somewhere, or whether it's doing a speaking engagement, doing some teaching. I will then try to maybe link that up with exploring a little bit. This summer, I taught a week-long program in Budapest with the University of Louisville, which was a great opportunity. I had American law students and European law students, and I taught a course on separation of powers or presidential powers. So we were able to do some comparative issues across countries. But I also took time to explore Budapest while I was there, and then after the program, go up to Krakow and visit Auschwitz and see Krakow, which is a really wonderful kind of like underrated city that I'd encourage people to visit.
We have a couple of questions here in the chat, and they're both pretty similar here. Both of them relate to what is your favorite food or dish that you've experienced when you were out traveling? And I think given you spend sounds like a lot of time overseas, especially, there might be some interesting foods that you've tried.
Yeah, so I'm not the most adventurous eater, but when you do travel, you do sort of encounter lots of different kinds of dishes. I remember being in Peru and the guinea pig there, which I tried just because I was there. But um, that is one of the great things about going all around the world. I was in Mexico City a couple of years ago and went to a market and was able to experience lots of the great flavors that inspire sort of Mexican cooking. You can get more fresh like seafood and other foods depending on where you are around the world. My trip to Brazil, I went to the Olympics in 2016 with my sister, who's a very adventurous eater, and she got me hooked on acai. Um, so that's the two of us in front of the Olympic rings in Rio. And I wasn't familiar with acai at the time. It's a fruit that's kind of grown, I think, in the Amazon region. And she sort of got me hooked when we were in Rio, and now it's one of my favorite foods. My clerks will know that I go out a couple times a week to get acai bowls for lunch.
Nice. Have you found, is it difficult to get in the United States or
It's all over the place now.
overseas?
I
Okay.
actually Oklahoma City in the Oklahoma City airport, I was able to get an acai bowl. So that
Okay.
tells me it's penetrated the market
Yeah.
pretty well here in the U.S.
So what's been your favorite place that you've been?
That's a hard question. So this summer I went to Alaska, and that was my 50th state. I also, and yeah, there's a picture of my daughter and me at a waterfall near Juneau, right near the Mendenhall Glacier, which unfortunately flooded just a few days after we were there pretty significantly. But Alaska was my 50th state. And I also was able to visit Slovakia in between my trip this summer between Budapest and Krakow, which is my 40th country. So it's a little hard to pick favorites, but I'll say regions. So in the United States, I really love going out west. I mean, seeing the mountains, they're just spectacular. They really take your breath away. So whether it's Utah or Colorado, Montana, all these wonderful western states. This was a trip that my daughter and I took during the pandemic, so we couldn't leave the country. I've tried to take my daughter out of the country sort of once a year, usually during the summer, to see something. During the pandemic summer, you couldn't leave the country, so we flew out to Utah and did a lot of the national parks. This is me at Zion National Park on our way up to um, the landing before Angel's Landing. So we didn't quite do the chain link up to the top of Angel's Landing. It was actually closed for COVID. Query whether you're going to actually get COVID from being outdoors on top of a big rock. But I'm not sure I would have done it anyway. But we got to as close as you get to Angel's Landing without actually embarking on that part of the trip. But the Western United States, I just think is beautiful. And whenever I go there or speak there, I always ask people, don't forget how beautiful this is. If you need to come to Ohio for a couple days, and it's a pretty state, but when you go back home, you'll just realize how majestic the mountains are and how beautiful and stunning they are. Uh, Outside the United States, I've really come to like Eastern Europe. So I've spent, in terms of being outside the United States, I spent more time in Europe than any other continent. And of course, I've been to France, Italy, Spain, England, wonderful countries. But I've really enjoyed time in kind of Central and Eastern Europe, really beautiful places that are just as historic, but a little less traveled. And so a little less crowded. The people maybe are a little friendlier. They see tourists, but maybe not quite as many tourists. And I highly recommend, getting away from the sort of the biggest travel sites and trying to kind of go to other places that, might be a real surprise and might even be more enjoyable in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you said you were recently in Alaska. I think that's one of my favorite trips I've been on is Alaska, and I went there during the COVID year, which was really nice to be out where there's open space and be out in the wilderness and not have to worry as much about regulations and those sorts of things.
You know,
So,
one of the great things about traveling is you can also see people you know. I mean, one great thing is to, especially if you're sort of in another country, is to find locals who can help you kind of experience the country in a local way. But that's true for the United States as well, though it's easier kind of to assimilate here if you're traveling. But my friend Steve Cox is the one who I did some vacationing in Alaska, and then got to see him, and we did a couple programs, a couple talks together. Since I've been there, he was named the Attorney General of Alaska. So congratulations to him. I'm not sure if it was my visit that put him over the top to get the appointment, but thrilled that Alaska's got such a great attorney general leading the law enforcement efforts there.
um, we have another question here in the Q&A. Have you ever run into any of your clerks on an international trip?
That's very funny. This could be my clerk who I did run into. So yes, so I have two sort of just crazy, completely unexpected running into people travel stories. The first one was not a clerk, but it was a high school friend who I had not seen in 20 years at least. And we both happened to be on a cruise in the North Sea in Europe and just ran into each other by the water slide and have reunited and have kept in touch since. And then a couple of years ago, my daughter and I were in Switzerland and we had gone to the top of Mount Pilatus and had then come down and we got on a little ferry boat that was going to take us across the lake back to where we could catch a bus back to Zurich. And Juliet, one of my current clerks who just started, happened to be on the same boat on the same lake in Switzerland. So incredibly small world moment. You don't expect to hear Judge Readler. I don't hear it very often anywhere, but I did not expect to hear that on a boat in Switzerland. But a great happenstance, and she's now in Chambers, and very happy about that.
That's that's a funny story, and it really is a small world. It's funny how you run into people, you know. But when you talked about teaching in other countries, how much research do you do in the law on the law when you're just visiting for fun? Do you like to compare U.S. law to other countries when you're just traveling for pleasure?
Yeah, both. I mean, yes and no. I mean, on most trips, I'm probably not studying up on law other than sort of if there's like a customs issue I need to know or something along those lines. But I have done some travel that's involved kind of rule of law projects or comparative law issues. I have really enjoyed traveling to European countries, African countries as well. So Kenya is what I'm thinking of, and meeting judges in those countries and learning about sort of the court system and judging and how judges are selected and how judges do their jobs and how long they serve. That's fascinating because there are always some similarities between our systems and there are always some differences. And so I have this, now I have the same job as those jurists in other parts of the world. And it's really fun to kind of learn about the similarities and the differences between our job and sort of how we do our jobs and what our courts are like and what the dynamics are like. That's a lot of fun. But the other thing I've done is I had some rule of law projects. So one of the great opportunities I had as a lawyer was to go to Kenya with an organization called Lawyers Without Borders. This is a photo of the group. There were probably 25 of us, I think mostly in the front row. I'm on the far right of the group. But the front row were American and English lawyers and judges. I was not a judge at the time, but there were, I think, 5 or 6 judges on the trip with us. And we basically helped train Kenyan lawyers for a week on how to prosecute domestic violence cases. So the Kenyan legal system evolved from the English system, just like our system did. So there are a lot of similarities between sort of the Kenyan trial practice and American trial practice. As I recall, they don't have opening statements in Kenyan trials, but otherwise, the dynamics of the trial are very similar to what you expect in the United States. At the time, this is now I think almost 15 years ago, but Kenya had recently passed some domestic violence laws to address kind of a major societal issue there and other places. But they were having trouble, actually enforcing the law and getting convictions in cases where they where that was, thought to be appropriate. So we for a week, walked them through some trial training trips, some mock tips, some mock trials, and it was such a rewarding experience, both professionally but just personally, to spend a week with, actual Kenyans, mostly all lawyers, so we had that in common, but otherwise, very different upbringings and cultures, and that's probably one of the best trips I've taken in my life.
So, on that same note, we have a question here in the Q&A, asking like, what's the most significant or shocking difference that you've seen in how the law is practiced in other countries?
Uh, Difference. I mean, it's sometimes hard to say. I've actually seen some court proceedings in a few other countries, but they were not conducted in English, so it's quite hard to sort of appreciate what was going on. But I mean, there's so many. I was just in Israel this summer, and we were able to meet with one of the justices from the Israeli Supreme Court. But I would say their selection system for judges is quite different than the American model, and that's true. Every country sort of has their own way for how they select judges. But judicial reform was a major issue in Israel, and it still is. But it was bubbling up as a major topic before October 7th. And when the attacks on October 7th happened, then it kind of obviously subsided to other issues that were more important at the time in the country. But the way they select their Supreme Court justices is very different. The executive, or they say the head of the Knesset, the leadership doesn't have a significant role in selecting judges. It's done through committees that involve lawyer groups and law school deans and a couple of political appointees, but very different system. And I think it's having kind of a different, has a different impact on their judicial system than our system, which obviously judges are nonpartisan and not in political roles, but we're selected by political actors. And so political developments do kind of influence who ends up on our court system.
Yeah, that's very interesting. To shift gears a little bit, uh, what are your thoughts on solo travel versus group travel?
Yeah, I've done a lot of both. Solo travel is fun, I think, or is there are two things that I think are really great about it. One, you don't sort of have to negotiate with anyone else about what you want to do that day, where you have to do if you're in a group. Let's say maybe it's like being a district judge. So everything I do is in groups of three and occasionally groups of 16. So we're always negotiating a bit. And if you're traveling on your own, you kind of pick and choose what you want to do. And the other thing is you're kind of vulnerable in the sense because you don't know people, and I think you tend to meet a lot of people when you're traveling on your own because you do want to talk to people. You want to socialize. You want to share moments with people, even if they're, essentially total strangers. And so I think you end up meeting a lot more people while when you're traveling on your own. But traveling with a group is great too. You really get to know people well because, when people are kind of out of their element a little bit. Like sometimes it brings out the best and worst in folks, and so you learn a lot about people. And both trips have their appeal.
So, are you more of a spontaneous traveler, or do you have a meticulous plan that you follow when you do go?
Yeah, when I first started traveling, I was very detail oriented because I didn't know if I'd ever go to Paris again, or I didn't know if I'd ever go to Rome again. So I was going to make sure that time I went that I did everything possible, and I mapped it all out. But over time, I kind of mellowed on that approach because when you're so programmed, you can miss kind of some lighter things or some other opportunities. I've also had the experience where I didn't plan something and then I totally missed like the number one thing to do in the city because I couldn't get a ticket or whatnot. When I went to Mexico City, there's some great Diego Rivera murals in the presidential palace, basically in Mexico City. But it turns out you need to get tickets like a month in advance to see those. So I was outside the palace but could not get in. Um, Sometimes, if we have, I think younger lawyers or soon to be lawyers, if you're working at a law firm, you can be very busy and maybe you do have to be a little more spontaneous about just planning a trip because you're on a trial and the trial or the case, you're on a big case and the case settles and all of a sudden you have a couple weeks that are a lot lighter in your schedule. Sometimes that's when you just have to take a trip. And so maybe it's a little more spontaneous. I'm going to give you one example. of that. I was my first year at my law firm, Jones Day. I was on a major trial. The trial ended, and I both had a lot of hours accumulated in terms of billable and had some free time in my schedule. So, another new associate who was working with me, we just decided to go on like a 10-day road trip down south. And I had not been to sort of the deep south, but we drove down to Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and just had a great time. Visited all kinds of great historic places and cultural places. Really fun trip that I remember a lot of it to this day. Um, the other part about the story that some people might find interesting is my travel partner was Peter Phipps, who is now a judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. So when we were brand new lawyers, just out of law school, we went on this really fun road trip. Wasn't so crazy that things happened that we couldn't get confirmed to be judges. It was pretty tame in that sense, but it was very spontaneous and very fun. And now we are both circuit judges, which I'm sure neither of us saw coming, but both really appreciate the opportunity to serve.
So what's been the most meaningful travel that you've experienced?
Probably the trip to Kenya, where again I was, working with Kenyans and really understanding a lot about some of the challenges. This was a lighter trip, so this was meaningful in a different way. Been to Kenya twice. So the first time I went was mostly for a Lawyers Without Borders program. I did a very, very short safari, and I decided I wanted to go back and do kind of a full safari, and went with my daughter. That's from a few years ago. That was a great trip once we got to Kenya, but it was 2021, so all the COVID restrictions were still in place, and getting there and getting back was a hassle to say the least, including realizing that we were in Nairobi and we had to catch a plane in 3 hours and we had to get COVID tests before we got on the plane, and we had to find some place in Nairobi on very, very short notice to get a COVID test. But I will lump this in with some other travel. I will say my two trips to Israel, where both times I got to interact with, some political leaders and some jurists and others. I took a trip to Moldova where I taught IP law to Moldovan judges. And I did a fellowship through the German Marshall Fund when I was in private practice, which was not a law related program, but I got to go to Europe for a month and go to places that are more standard, like say Berlin or Hamburg in Germany, but places that are a little more out of the way, like Istanbul and Ankara in Turkey and Montenegro. And all of those trips were trips that there was certainly a lot of fun parts too, but I also got to meet with business leaders, cultural leaders, political leaders, and just learn a lot about the country and the dynamics of the region and beyond. So those could, if people have a chance to kind of participate in those kind of programs, they're just so rewarding. You learn so much. You have a lot of fun. You make friends for life. There are people I keep in touch with from some of those trips. And you also just never quite know what you're going to find when you travel. So even when you have expectations, usually there are things that happen that you weren't expecting that really turn out to be pleasant surprises in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all those different cultural differences, how do you navigate that from languages, cultural practices, making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Uh, one great um, advantage to being American is that English is spoken virtually everywhere in the world, and especially most of the places you would go to visit. It's actually fun to go to a place where English is not spoken as much, so it's a real luxury for Americans. I really don't speak another language. I can just speak a very little Spanish, but if you can learn some language, I think that's really appreciated. And if you can just be humble and just appreciate that you don't know a lot of things about the country you're visiting and that you want to learn, I think most people that you meet are going to want to show off. They're proud of where they live and they're going to want to show it off. And so some humility and some curiosity can really go a long way in terms of making a trip even sort of that much better.
So to shift gears a little bit, What's your favorite landmark or architectural feat that you've seen on your travels?
Boy, there's so many. Um, I guess the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which I think is still being built, and I've seen it a couple different times over its evolution, but it's just this remarkable structure with incredible detail that I don't think anyone would start to try out to build now, but it's a real marvel, and will continue to be as it's continues to be constructed. One of the places I haven't been to that was pretty high on my bucket list is to go to see the Great Wall in China. I just can't really quite comprehend how long and big the wall is, and that it was built so many years ago. So that's probably one place that's on my list of things to see.
So, um, is there what else is on your bucket list? You just talked about the Great Wall, but do you have big plans going forward?
I hope so, but you never know. I South Africa has been on my list for a number of years, so I'm really hoping to get there, both to see Cape Town, which sounds like it's one of the world's most beautiful cities. Obviously, there's a lot of incredible history, and obviously tension over the years that people in South Africa has faced. Would be great to sort of learn a little more about that. You can do safaris there. They have wine country. That's probably the top of my list. I really want to explore more of South America. I've been to Peru, I've been to Brazil, and I've been to Argentina. But I would like to see more of. I'd like to go to Colombia. I'd like to go to Chile, go down to sort of southern Chile and Argentina and see Patagonia. Would love to get to the Galapagos sometime. I don't know if that will happen. So I have a lot of places I still want to go. One of the great things about South America is that there's basically no time change, so you can fly kind of overnight, arrive at a in a way a very different place, but you're more or less in the same time zone, maybe an hour off or two at the most that you would have been when you left the United States. So you can just really hit the ground running, and you don't have that jet lag that you have when you go east or west.
That's fantastic. Um, and you said you've completed all 50 states, right?
Yes.
Okay. So 50 states, how many continents?
Just North America, South America, Europe, and Asia, if you would count, say, Turkey or Israel. But
Okay.
Asia is a kind of unexplored continent for me. I do want to go, but I've also found so many places to go that are easier to get to. Um, and I would love to get to Australia or New Zealand at some point.
So what's your favorite travel story?
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a few. I'll pick one that had some lows and some highs. So my daughter and I went to mostly to Central Europe a couple of years ago. We went to Berlin. We stopped in Budapest. We stopped in Amsterdam and Vienna. But the end of Vienna, my daughter was 18 at the time, I think. But the Vienna part of the trip, Vienna is a beautiful city. It was, a world capital at one point, and it rivals, I think, Paris and other places in terms of just the beauty of the buildings, the architecture. But we were there actually to see a singer. I don't know if you've heard of her. Her name's Taylor Swift, and she had a big tour going on that summer in Europe. So we'd bought tickets. We planned the trip to go to Europe, but kind of the coup de grace of the trip was going to be seeing Taylor Swift, which I was excited to see. My daughter was very excited to see her. And we arrived in Vienna. The concert was the next day, and it was in the evening, and I was in the gym working out, and I got a text message that some terrorists had been arrested who had plotted to blow up the stadium or to commit a major attack on attendees of the of one of the nights of the upcoming Taylor Swift concerts. And that was really alarming. This was just 24 hours before the concert that we were going to attend. And a few hours later, the concert was canceled. And on the one hand, I'm thinking how lucky we were that authorities captured the individuals who were going, who wanted to had this plot, I think pretty well thought out from what I read in the news to attack the concert, which would, you know, could have been an easy target. I'm not sure. On the other hand, there was massive disappointment. I mean, my daughter was disappointed, but all around the city was just full of Americans and some Europeans, a lot of teenage girls who had were there to see Taylor Swift and had planned on this for a long time. And there's more to life than seeing concerts, but you knew this was very, very important to them. And in fact, there were groups of mostly teenage girls gathering all around the city singing Taylor Swift songs. So they'd be outside the big cathedrals or whatnot the next day singing her songs, which was a really neat, sort of reflection on their appreciation for her and a way they could sort of share in that community, sort of Swifty community, without actually going to the concert. But the happy ending to the story is that we were going to Amsterdam, then we're going to fly home. We were able to reroute the trip to go to London for an extra day. And Taylor Swift was going to be in London. Her first concert there was a Thursday. So we were supposed to leave Amsterdam on Wednesday, but we rerouted, flew to London, did not even go into the city. Went to a hotel near Wembley Stadium. The next day, we went up to the stadium. We got to see the concert. It was just fantastic. This is my daughter and me at the show. My era was 1989, so I was wearing my shirt to reflect that. It was an awesome show. I mean, I like Taylor Swift, but it was just a really wonderful show in terms of the joy. There was so much joy in the stadium. Ed Sheeran was a guest singer, or who she sometimes has special guests. It was Ed Sheeran, which probably pretty high on the list of guests that you can have. So we were able to make the best of it. We flew on the next day. I was really thrilled that could happen, but I'm also still disappointed for everyone who was in Vienna who wanted to see her there and wasn't able to do so.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you and your daughter got to see Taylor Swift. I've never seen Taylor Swift, but I have seen Travis Kelce, so we're close at least. Um, you talked about Eastern Europe kind of being a hidden gem. Are there any American cities or locations that you think that you've stumbled upon that maybe surprised you?
A lot, and I guess there's not as you ask it, there's not one that comes to mind, but boy, it is, it's fun to fly places and kind of go point to point. But if you have time to take a road trip, just the things you just kind of randomly come across can be really, really fun to explore and maybe just sort of venture out of your way a little bit to go see something. I really love it when I have a chance to kind of drive somewhere and have the freedom to stop in a city or oftentimes a small city or a campus or something like that, and explore a new place that I don't know a lot about. There's just a lot of real sort of pleasure in doing that. So there's just so many great. I'm not going to sort of pick among them. Um, Obviously, there are a lot of great cities in the Sixth Circuit. I'm sort of biased that way. We have some great states, but just getting out and exploring, if you have the luxury of time, a cross country trip where you can kind of just deviate to different places, um, can be really fantastic.
Well, you've been to 50 states. I've been to 46. One of the states left on my list is Michigan, which you're very familiar with. Do you have
Yeah.
any recommendations of what I need to do once I make a trip to Michigan?
I do. So I think you're going to get, relatively speaking, you're going to get to 50 before me. I was over 50 years old before I got to 50, and so I think you're gonna beat that mark by quite a bit. So Michigan's a wonderful state. Two recommendations: one, Ann Arbor. I'm completely biased about this because I have 2 degrees from the University of Michigan, but it is a great college town. It's certainly one of the best. And if you like, sort of small, culturally interesting, unique, different cities with a lot of culture, great food, great traditions, Ann Arbor is top of the list in my mind. Great place to visit. But northern Michigan, which I would include sort of the northern half of the Lower Peninsula and then the Upper Peninsula, is some of the most beautiful country in the United States, and that's true summer, fall, spring, winter. In the summer, there's great boating. We have all kinds of lakes, and of course, you have the Great Lakes too. But we have inland lakes, great hiking, and in the winter, there's skiing and all the outdoor activities. So highly, highly recommend northern Michigan, whether it's the Upper Peninsula or the upper part of the Lower Peninsula. I'm so jealous because one of my colleagues, Rick Griffin, actually lives in Traverse City, and he's got this office that overlooks the bay. And I just think, wow, what a lucky guy he is to be able to live up there.
Well, now I'm really excited to get to Michigan. So um, it looks like we've covered most of the questions here in the chat that I'm seeing. So I might have one more question. Do you have any travel advice for law students or young lawyers who maybe think they're not going to have either the time or the resources to travel?
Yeah, that's a legitimate issue. If you're at a big law firm, you might have the money, but you may not have the time. If you're working in the government, which I do now and have done before, maybe you can get the time a little easier, but things can be expensive. So I don't have a lot of kind of, suggestions other than, different times of the year, the prices change quite a bit. But what I will draw one parallel between law and travel. Um, One reason I like to travel, and I sort of touched on this earlier, but I'm just very curious. I'm a very curious person. I'm just curious about how things work, how people live, how things operate. And that's one of the reasons I like to explore and see different parts of the world because you're just always learning something, whether it's a different state or especially a different country. And I also think that's probably the best skill for lawyers, especially young lawyers, is to be curious. So you should travel because you're curious, but you should also be very curious in the job. You should always be thinking, is there another answer to this problem or to this question? Is there another way I can look at something? There's a initial answer that you draw, or in my job, we're getting briefs and people are briefing things to us, and maybe we, tentatively think, boy, it looks like this is how you resolve something. But the best lawyers are the ones who are willing to sort of be creative and to wonder, to explore, see what else is out there in the law and in legal thought. And maybe there's another case or another argument or another doctrine that might really help you um, win a case. Or maybe you need to keep digging through the record because there's one more good document or good admission or good quote somewhere. There's obviously limits to how much time you can spend on any given project, but curiosity is a really, really great skill or an important, attribute for lawyers, especially young lawyers, as they're, working through issues and trying to solve maybe, problems or assignments they get from our senior lawyers. That's one thing I really like about the law because there's just endless things to explore. And one thing I like about traveling because there's also endless things to explore around the globe.
That's great. Well, thank you. It's been great to talk to you about travel, and it's been very interesting. And I want to thank you again for being here, and I thank everybody in the audience. I have one announcement to make. Next month's SOC Sidebar will be held on Tuesday, October 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It will feature Judge John Bush, and they will be discussing karaoke.
Well, if I can say two things in close. One, I've heard Judge Bush sing; he's excellent. Hopefully, he will perform some on the podcast. So that's going to be a real treat. And two, Jason, when you do come to Michigan, let me know, especially if it's in the fall. I'd love to take you to a Michigan football game.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.